The execution of Donald Trump's mass deportation program has been brutal, violent, and deeply unpopular. The American public, you and me, we've borne witness to a procession of horrifying videos of neighbors being mistreated by newly emboldened federal forces in mass sweeps. Now there's a way to quantify the government's overreach. A team of journalists at Politico, led by the senior legal affairs reporter there, Kyle Cheney, has been following and analyzing the thousands of lawsuits that have been filed against government officials by immigrants who have been detained by ICE. They created a database of those cases, and the findings from their analysts are stark. There have been 11,600 lawsuits filed between July of last year and now. The Trump administration has prevailed in about 1,200 of those cases, which means, this is just basic Sunday morning math, judges ruled against the Trump administration in 10,400 cases, roughly 90% of all the lawsuits reviewed by Politico. Now, what's legal and what's not? The law does grant the president broad discretion to determine how to carry out the mission of immigration enforcement. But it does not give him unilateral authority to detain or deport whomever he wants. There are still, believe it or not, some guardrails in place. There are some laws that protect individual rights, including the rights of the so-called undocumented. I want to get into that term a little bit. Other news outlets call them illegal. We don't call them illegal, but now I'm thinking maybe undocumented doesn't even really get you to the point. And I'll tell you why in a minute. There are procedures that the government must follow when there is somebody who claims asylum or tries to become an immigrant to this country. The procedures are there to ensure that the rights are protected. But the court records that Politico studied revealed that the Trump administration's approach has violated many of those laws and procedures. More than 400 district court judges across the country have been involved in deciding these cases. Judges appointed by both Democratic and Republican presidents have ruled against this administration's policies, including some appointed by Trump. Some of those losses have been self-inflicted. In a number of cases, detainees were released after the Justice Department told the judge that it did not have, quote, an opposition argument to present. Can you imagine that? They just didn't have an argument to present. They've arrested someone, and they're in front of a judge, and I don't know, I got nothing to say here. The vast majority of the rulings against the government, by the way, involved the Trump administration's controversial mandatory detention policy. Previously, only unauthorized immigrants arrested at the border were held in detention for the duration of their removal proceedings, which, by the way, can take months at best, but typically years. But last July, this guy, Todd Lyons, the outgoing head of ICE, issued a memo that dramatically expanded who's eligible to be detained without bond. The government now says that anyone who entered the country illegally can be arrested and held for, quote, the duration of their removal proceedings. That's a process, as I said, that can take months at best, typically years. Now, under this, let's call it a novel interpretation, ICE can detain any undocumented immigrant present in the United States for an unspecified period of time, regardless of how long they've been here or whether or not they've got a criminal record or even if they have some legal right to be in the United States. And in many cases, these people you talk about or we talk about as undocumented do have legal protections in the United States under various programs. And by the way, Lyons' memo isn't legally binding. You don't just get to make the law with a memo. It represents the administration's interpretation of a particular law, which is a departure from how every other past administration has interpreted the same law. But this is what was given to ICE as a green light to move around aggressively and round up immigrants anywhere at any time. Actually, not just immigrants, some citizens. In one case out of New York, ICE detained a man who was granted Special Immigrant Juvenile Status. It's a program enacted by Congress that offers a path to citizenship for minors who've been abused, neglected, or abandoned by their parents. ICE arrested him without a warrant, which is how things go these days, and when presented with proof of his status, they detained him anyway. The judge in his case reprimanded the government for arresting him, quote, simply because he looked like someone else for whom the agents were purportedly searching, end quote. The judge added, quote, this isn't how things are supposed to work in America. Unquestionably, the laws of human decency condemn such villainy, end quote. In another case out of California, a 70-year-old Iranian woman filed a lawsuit after ICE had kept her in detention for months. When her case was finally reviewed, the judge chastised the government. Quote, it appears that respondents meaning the government, arrested a chronically ill 70-year-old woman who came to this country to avoid religious persecution and applied for asylum, who has lived here peacefully for 26 years, complied with all check-in requirements and other conditions of release, who has no known criminal record and poses no threat to anyone, then kept her in detention for months without sufficient medical care, and they do not have any argument to offer to even try to justify these actions. Even try. Some judges have resorted to referencing Greek mythology to express their frustration with this administration's policy. One judge in Pennsylvania, who had reviewed multiple ICE detention cases, compared the government's effort to that of Sisyphus, endlessly pushing a boulder up a hill. Quote, the government returns again and again to push the same theory uphill, only for courts to send it rolling back down again. So what's the point of all this? Why go through all this trouble and waste taxpayers' money to pursue the detention and deportation of people that the courts say are not supposed to be detained or deported? Well, I think in part this is the government testing its theory. The cases that Politico kept track of are from district courts. Some cases have made it to federal appeals court around the country, and the results at the appeals courts have been mixed. 3 appellate courts have rejected the administration's position regarding its detention policy. 2 others have ruled in favor of it, which probably means it's headed to the Supreme Court. But ICE's detention policy serves another purpose entirely, and that is fear. Because if the government really does want to find and deport the worst of the worst, the rapists and the murderers, it actually has the resources and the means to do so. And it actually has the law on its side. The government overwhelmingly wins cases on the merits against people like that. But instead, the government's actions are meant to send a message that immigrants in general are not welcome here. Might even scare immigrants enough that they leave the country on their own.